Hello and welcome. My name is Colin Miles, the creator of the Accounting Translator and also known as the Numbers Guy. Today we're going to look at some of the concerns around launching a small business. And if you stick around to the end, I'd love for you to grab a couple of free ebooks as a way of saying thank you. Have you ever been thinking about booking a once-in-a-lifetime holiday? Well, you wouldn't just launch in, you'd start with some structure, some research, and start to weigh up the different styles, perhaps considering a cruise versus land-based, free roaming, or a very itinerary-driven program. Well, launching a business is no different. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the top 5 questions every entrepreneur needs to ask about starting a business, but have been too afraid to ask. That's my theme for this presentation. So the first one is we need to think about the business expenses. How are we going to manage these? Are we going to perhaps use a mobile app? Should we look at software? Should we look at an accountant? The second question is the status of your business. Should we be thinking about being self-employed? Maybe it's just going to be a hobby. What about an S-Corp? What about an LLC? All words that entrepreneurs need to understand, and we'll look at those in a few moments. The third question is accountant versus app. What do we mean by that? Well, should we look to have an accountant? With this day and age, should we look at using apps? The whole world is there's an app for that. But how does an app know what's allowable? How does an app not know what's allowable? And we're going to have an exploration of that in this section. The fourth question is working from home. How do we decide, is working from home the best approach? Or should we in fact go and rent an office? We'll look at that as well, and some of the no-nos that go inside there. And last but no means least, the fifth and final question that we're going to answer and review is tax and the IRS. How do we deal with that? What's involved? And what do we need to know? So that's what we're going to look at over the next few minutes. So let's leap on in, shall we? So what can I claim as an expense? Well, this is a question that most entrepreneurs get a little confused about. They basically think, it's my money, I should be able to claim anything. Well, the thing we need to think about is that ultimately there is a definition that the IRS likes to believe in, that HMRC believes in, and any tax authority does too. And the simple thing is it should be wholly and exclusively for the production of sales or services in your business. Now, a lot of those are fairly straightforward. For example, if you're in a retail store or you sell a product, well, then you're going to have COGS, the cost of goods sold. And these are basically the fees that go around when you buy things. So products that you're going to sell. So, for example, in a coffee shop, you'll be buying coffee to sell. If you're in a retail store selling clothing, you'll be buying clothes that you're going to sell. So they're obviously an expense. They're wholly and exclusively to produce the sales. So that's fairly straightforward. Then we get a little bit more complicated as to some of the subjective things. Well, as a small business, you might be working from home. Therefore, there are some home office costs that you can claim, and we're going to cover those a little bit later in a specific section. Then there's the business admin side of your business. And again, these are directly related to generating sales. So things like obviously some stationery, things like if you've bought a computer, if you have a mobile phone. Again, these are fairly obvious that they are needed to generate the sales. However, what we can't do is obviously claim things that really aren't having anything to do with generating of sales. We'll look at those in a few more moments. Of course, there's travel, but again, it needs to relate to the business generation. You can see there's a bit of a theme here. It needs to generate sales. So if you're traveling to see a client, that's totally acceptable. If, however, you're traveling from your home to your office because you've decided to have an office, well, that's viewed as commuting, and that's not wholly and exclusively for the generation of sales because you do those when you're in the office. And there are some other grey areas that you need to be aware of. And how do you claim the travel is a whole nother version. Then there's the telephone. Now again, that's got a little grey. If you have a business line in your office at home, well, that's exclusively useful for the business. You have your mobile phone. But what about the internet in your house? Well, we need to be careful because if the internet is also being used for your PlayStation, for your children, for your family to stream Netflix, then we have a trouble. We can't claim it all, so we need to be careful. So it's again, remember, what are the expenses related to the business use and sales generation? And the final cost that we can also think about inside expenses is the finance costs. What do we mean by that? We mean things like if you're taking credit cards, then obviously there's a charge from the credit card company. If you have a loan, it's not the full payment that can be deducted, but the interest can. And again, lots of complication, but it's important to be aware of what you can do. So that's a sort of a top line view on what expenses are. So the message here is the wholly and exclusively for the production of sales in your business. So what are we going to look at next? Well, let's have a look at how should you structure your business. And do you need a law degree to understand that? Well, yes and no. You don't really. There are many ways you can structure your business, and often the very simplest way is that you're going to be doing it as a hobby. The IRS and HMRC in the UK understand that people sometimes like to have a go at a hobby. They're not expecting you to really make any money out of this, and it's just something that you're trying, and there are some limits when it's viewed as still being a hobby. But that's a great way to start. You don't want to leap in and have huge expenses if this really is only just going to be something on the side, or something you're going to do in your spare time. Then there's what we like to call the side hustle, where you're actually starting to take and make some money, and therefore you need to think about it. This might be you're still in a full-time job, but you're doing something on the side. Well, the remembering is that the tax authorities are going to want to know about it. Even if you're just doing it in the evening, once you start making some money, and probably in the region of $1,000 or £1,000, then you're going to need to think about that this is going to have an impact on your personal tax, and is something that the tax authorities are going to want to know about. Then you might take the leap. You might decide to leave your full-time job. You might leave that W-2 behind. You might take your P45 if you're in the UK, and you're going to jump on in and you're going to be self-employed. Well, this is by far the simplest methodology because it allows you to start. Literally, you can start straight away. You can use your social security number, your national insurance number to start your business. You don't need anything formal. You don't need to register yourself, unlike when we look at perhaps S Corps and other variations. And you can be an independent contractor, small business owner, etc. You have lots of different words, but in essence, you're still responsible for your taxes, and you will tell the tax authorities in your annual tax return that you have made some money and how much tax, etc. you need to know. So it starts to get a little complicated, but the ultimately is you just need to let the tax authorities know that you have gone out on your own and become self-employed. Then in this case, for this example, we're going to look at the US side and the S Corp. This is taking it to the next level. An S corporation is a special type of corporation formed through filing a certificate of formation with the Office of the Secretary of State of your state, as well as the necessary tax authorities, the IRS. But in essence, it's starting to give you a little bit of distinction. And in essence, an S Corp is known as a pass-through entity, meaning that the business income and losses pass through still to your owner's individual tax return. This means the taxes you pay on your business income as well as your business deductions are the same as if you're a sole trader, sole partnership. However, you are now then able to take some deductions, some eligibilities from some of the tax codes, but also more importantly for you, once your revenue gets to a reasonable size, you're going to be actually able to benefit from not having to pay any self-employment taxes that you will as a self-employed individual. And we'll look at more of that later when we look at the IRS section. Then if your business is doing rather well, you might then move on to an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. And now we're starting to have two entities. You have your business entity and you have your personal entity. So it becomes more complicated, but your business will have some protection as having limited liability, but there are more registration, there is more forms, and obviously there's more costs involved with requirements for your accounting function, etc. And finally, and most importantly, if you really do scale up and what's next and your business is going to really go and you want to play in the big leagues, then you'll move into what we call a C Corp. And again, that's not what we're really focused on here. This is the smaller side of the business and the entrepreneur. But a C Corp is going to be one of those large corporations that has tax advisors and accountants, etc. That leads me really nicely on to my next section, which is there's an accountant for that, or is it an app? So an accountant versus an app. As an accountant, as the numbers guy, I like to think of ourselves when you look at it as accountants or bookkeepers that we are your own personal Yoda. And therefore, we're able to help you understand and maneuver yourself through the various elements of running a business. But let's have a look at what's out there. Well, there are obviously mobile apps. In this current day and age, there's almost an app for everything. There are apps that will track your mileage. There are apps that will take pictures of your receipts. There are apps that will capture your expenditure. There's almost apps that will remind you to send invoices, to chase invoices. So they're very powerful nowadays. However, they only show you part of the picture. And as a result, you could end up with half a dozen different apps all trying to do the same thing. Then there are the crossover apps that have started to appear. And these are apps that perhaps a little bit, I'm using an example here of TripLog. TripLog will not only do your mileage, but it will also allow you to start capturing some expenses. And they've also started to realize that they need to have access to, or give access to your accountant, the numbers guy, aka me, so that they can interface with them. So starting to get a little bit more complicated, but still only give you half the picture because they don't give you all of the details. Then we have accounting software. And again, big push. QuickBooks is a big company here. Xero, Sage, there are many out there. But they're called accounting software for a reason. Because guess what? For them to be effective, they need to have both sides of the equation. And that's where an accountant will come in. That's where you need, as a business entrepreneur, to understand what your numbers mean so that you can make some powerful decisions. So we're starting to get a bigger picture. But as you can see, if you don't know what they're doing, they can be a real mess. We've had many examples where we have started working with clients to find that their accounting software is a complete mess because they didn't understand how to set it up, etc. So there are now then software with apps. You can see this is building. So we had apps, we had crossovers, we've got accounting software, and now there are software with apps. So think people like Wave, Xero, we're a certified Xero company here, and that's the company we recommend. QuickBooks is another one, a little bit more complicated and not quite so user-friendly in our opinion. But they're now starting to have apps. So again, you might have your software, accounting software, and then you can take a picture of your receipt. You can email your invoices to people and the software will chase it for you. So starting to come a little bit more complete there. Then there's the accountant, the old style CPA accountant as is known, perhaps the person who would do everything for you, but you only see them once a year and something like that. That's really old school, and that is not what we're all about here at Miles Better, and letting the numbers decide concept is about today, about now. So here, what we like to call the best way, the Miles Better way, is to use something along the lines of the accounting translator. That's where we'll work with you in real time to make sure that you're getting your numbers today through the use of software, through the use of apps, but that you understand what's happening and what they look like and why they're able to be so powerful. Right, so what's next on that question? Well, the next one we're going to look at is working from home. And again, this is where it gets a little complicated because it's not, as with everything with the tax authorities, it's not clear cut. So the thing I've put here, can I claim for my sofa cleaning? Well, the answer to that is, if we remember, was what are expenses that we're allowed? We're allowed expenses that are wholly and exclusively for the production of sales. Well, cleaning your sofa is not something that you would be able to claim. So, as I said, there are set rules, and that's where an accountant, that's where a tax authority, a tax advisor, somebody like ourselves, can come along and help and make sure that you understand what are the set rules for working with the IRS and HMRC. We can also talk about what you can't claim as well, because we understand that in your mind you'd like to try and claim everything. But things that you, for example, you can't claim for is remodeling your office. If it's in your home, that's part of your home. Repainting the office, that's part of your home. Now, if these were both a business office, that might be a little bit different. But when we're inside a home, it's really complicated and gets really difficult to identify what's going on. Can I buy some artwork and put it in my office? Well, no, not really. This is your home, etc. So often in the case, it's best to use what we call the simplified method. This is where the IRS and the tax authorities have come up with a fixed amount of money that you can claim each month, each week, each month, and each year. And it's a fixed, and it's the easiest option. And again here, at Let the Numbers Decide and Miles Better, all part of what we can do is help you understand that and allow you to make sure that you don't fall foul of any of the issues. Then there is the pitfalls of working from home, because again, if you don't decide to use the simplified method, then how much space have you allocated to the office? It needs to be a dedicated space. It can't just be a desk in the corner of the room that's used for you, for your children's homework, etc. The IRS wants to see dedicated space. And so as a result, hence the simplified is better. But if you do decide that you've got more space, and as for example here, being a virtual CFO program and running lots of online courses, we do have a dedicated space that we work from, but it is in our home. But we have a door that you can close, and it specifically is laid out as an office. And so therefore, we can use the cost basis. And you might be able to do the same. And that's where, as an accountant, that's where, as the accounting translator, the Let the Numbers Decide guy, we can help you confirm the right approach. So you would need to start measuring. We need to know the space. If, for example, if your office is 10% of your home, then we can probably look to claim 10% of the costs, etc. Gets more complicated and we need more justification. But there are rules and there are ways around it. But finally, and last but no means least, the IRS, they are quite hot on this at the moment. It's on the hot list, as we say. So it's important that you work with a tax advisor, with your CPA, with your accountants, to make sure that you are not over-claiming, because guess what? You'll get hit with a penalty, you'll get hit with interest charges, and of course, you'll have to pay tax back that you claimed as a tax credit. That leads us nicely on to the IRS, Mr. IRS as we like to call it, or Mr. Tax Authorities. There are only two certainties in life, I'm afraid. One is you will die, and the other one is taxes. And in a recent survey amongst entrepreneurs, paying things that they feared most was having to work with the IRS and pay their taxes. Number 2 on the list for entrepreneurs was unfortunately dying and leaving their family. So in this case, they would rather die than actually pay their taxes, which is a little strange, but again, does prove the point that taxes are there, and unfortunately, we have to pay them. Now, there are some key deadline dates, key lines in the sand that are important to be aware of as an entrepreneur working with the IRS here in the US. So the main one is the 31st of December. This is the year end for all corporations, all personal tax regimes, and everything in the IRS. So your period of turnover, your period of business, will be from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, affectionately known then as your year end. In many cases, once you become a sole trader, become a through an S Corp or an LLC here in the US, then you have quarterly payments. You need to be paying as you go. Many entrepreneurs unfortunately fall foul of this and don't put any money aside, don't pay the IRS their quarterly payments, and guess what? You're going to get penalties, and you're also going to get interest charges. So it's important that you work to know what your numbers are in real time, and that's what Let the Numbers Decide approach and concept is all about, and that's what we here at Miles Better believe and preach and work with. The next date to be aware of is the 15th of April, affectionately known as the tax day. By the 15th of April, you need to have filed your personal tax return. That's if you're a sole trader, sole proprietor. You need to have completed your accounts for your S Corp pass-through because it hits your personal tax regime. And you need to have completed everything and paid your taxes. If you've been paying quarterly in advance, then this is the truing up day and you pay the last bit that was not paid from before. It's an important date in the sand. You need to be aware also that the IRS, as a sole trader, sole proprietor, or an S Corp, that you are going to be responsible for self-employment tax. Many people forget this and think, I've paid my federal tax, I've paid my income tax. Yes, but as a sole trader, you have not paid anything towards the Medicare system, and as a result, you need to pay your Social Security and Medicare taxes on your profits. Some people view it as a double tax, but if you were a W-2 employee, you would have been paying two types of tax anyway. Just gets a little confusing because it's called self-employment tax and the other tax is called income tax. Another date that can sometimes be banded around is the 15th of October. If you work with your tax advisor and your accountant and you are a little bit slow in getting your paperwork sorted, then they can apply for an extension to the 15th of October. However, if you've let the numbers decide and worked yourself through our programs, then you'll be working in real time and actually you'll be able to file your taxes in January and have your money ready to pay straight away. The final area is tax filing, and this is where we would highly recommend working with a tax preparer because they know the ins and outs of the changes in the tax rules. They understand, and again here at Miles Better, I am a retained tax preparer for Liberty Tax, and so again we're on the cutting edge of all things to do with taxes. So, what have we looked at in the last 20 minutes? Well, we've looked at the top 5 questions every entrepreneur needs to ask about starting a small business, but has been afraid to ask. We looked at the business expenses, the fact that there are mobile apps, that there are software, but ultimately there are the accountants, and there's us, the accounting translator, using a let the numbers decide concept. We also looked at what was called the status of your business and what type of business you might want to set up, whether it be a self-employed, self-proprietor, whether you might move to have some S-Corp pass-through, therefore, again, protecting yourself a little bit from some of the tax regimes, moving ultimately to an LLC where you're going to have limited liability protection. But again, it's important to understand that all 3 stages have benefits and all 3 stages have negative points. Then we looked at what we like to call that there's an accountant for that. The accountant versus the app process. What's allowable, what's not allowable. And really the only people who can help you with that is a person because the rules change. Accounting software will just accept what you tell it. If you think it's claimable and you claim it, it's not going to challenge you. That's where here at Miles Better and letting the numbers decide is going to be able to help you. And then we talked about working from home and that there were 3 different methodologies. The simplified method, which is by far the most straightforward and least problematical, and some of the other no-nos when you're trying to claim. And then finally, we looked at the tax authorities and the fact that the 3 key points there were that December 31st is your year end, April 15th is the tax day, and remember, as a sole trader, the dreaded self-employment tax, the double tax in some places, needs to be put aside and needs to be set aside. Excuse me. So I hope you've enjoyed that sort of quick overview of the top 5 questions every entrepreneur needs to ask when starting a business. But I did promise you at the front that I would be offering some free ebooks and some other information. And what I would love to do is actually just tell you a little bit more about what we do here and what we would like to help you with. All right. So I'm really excited to let you know about our latest online course, affectionately known as Let the Numbers Decide. This 6-week course will help you launch or grow your business by letting the numbers decide rather than the normal fake it till you make it approach. Each module will build to allow you to start by drafting the blueprint to success, where we'll explore the foundations needed to launch or grow your business, covering the building blocks, the mindset, and the necessary research and study. Moving through cutting the ribbon as we launch the business in the first few months and support the concepts with the powerful decision machine, where we'll use the 3 secret documents of business I will reveal. Then we look at sweating the numbers and assets and oiling the machine to ensure continued success as an entrepreneur. Finally coming to the big question as what is next, a section we're calling Building the Empire. This course will include bonuses, group coaching sessions and additional material worth over £6,500 and more if you take some of the upgrade options. So as I said, as I promised at the beginning, please also enjoy 2 ebooks when you drop your email in as both a thank you for listening to this presentation and also as a start of the course. The first is the Accounting Translator Guide to Business, a plain speaking approach to the terms used in accounting, the language of business. The second is a 10-step overview of launching a business and will whet your appetite for the course. Don't put off till someday the chance to launch or grow your business, and I thank you for your time and interest, and we hope you have a miles better life.